Okay, so this was going to be the first video of the tutorials. It's going to be a bit longer, but what it's going to do is go through the Lightwell interface, show you how to add assets to the scene, a few little tips and tricks for working in the Layers tab, and then we're going to move on to animations and interactions. So first things first, let's take a look at the Lightwell interface. We have our four tabs that you'll be familiar with. We have Layers, which is where we arrange our assets. Interactions, which allows our readers to interact with the story. Animations to give objects and characters some motion and something to interact with. And our audio tab that allows you to import assets for dialogue, for music, and for sound effects. We're going to be working in this first video in the Layers window. You see some tools over here. We've got tablet and phone, so that is our screen size. This is the screen size that we'll be working with. So if you're designing for phone in the horizontal orientation, this is how big your screen size is going to be. And if you're designing for iPad, this is how big your screen size is going to be. The next three are parallax. That's when we want to preview our parallax, and I'll show you that in a moment when we do our background. Select, which allows us to select different assets on the screen, and move, which allows us to move those assets once they've been selected. So let's get some assets on the screen. The first thing we're going to do is create our sceneries, our background, and the place where our interactions are happening, where our characters and the story is being told. The easiest way to do this is to drag the images directly from a folder into the Layers window. So we're going to open up our folder. We're going to go to Swamp Background. And here we've got all of our background assets. And you'll notice that they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is pretty handy because how Lightwell organizes things when you bring them in is from 0 on up, and you'll see that in a moment. So we'll select all. We're going to, well, we don't need this one. We need background. So I command click, got rid of that. So I'm going to drag all of the images over here, and you're going to see that what it did is stack them all in order. It looks kind of weird because those images are actually designed for a bigger screen. So you'll see that they're squishing all off the screen. So if I was to select one of these layers, that, and I went to move, you'd see that, well, you can't see it, but you can see the boundaries are moving around. So it's really quite a bit bigger. Well, that doesn't work for us. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select all of my layers here. I'm going to group them together as one layer. I'm going to double click, call this background scenery. Did I spell that right? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm going to change the size of everything within that group to match my screen size. So I'll go down here to Properties, Scale, Width. You see these are linked together. I'll say 75%. Bang. Now everything fits in our scene the way we want it to. And you can actually see that it's quite a bit larger, but that works well for me. I'm good with 75%. You'll see why in a second when we do parallax. Good segue. Let's move into parallax. So what parallax is the difference between things that are far away and things that are close and the appearance of that motion. So we're going to go down here to the parallax window, and you see if you click on that, depending on the screen size, you might not see it. So we say, okay, well, I want to take 1. So just move that up. That's our icy background. Well, that's not going to do anything. That's right in our foreground. We're not going to notice that. So we'll leave that one alone. But 2 is our icy water here. So we want to give that a bit of movement. So with the parallax, things that are closer to it, we'll give it a larger number. So we're going to say 20, right? And you'll see when we do the test how that looks. 3, we're going to give that a 15. 4, we're going to give that a 12. 5, we're going to give that a 4. 6, we're going to give that a 2. And you're saying to yourself, how do you know which numbers to use? I've done some testing and I've checked out which numbers work for this particular layout. You'll want to test it, and the way to do that is click parallax, click in the screen, and drag around. And so you can see that's the movement of the elements. The reader is going to see that when they tilt the iPad. That's when you see that parallax effect. So you can see everything in the background is kind of moving, but things up close are moving a little bit more than things in the background. So that's how we set up parallax. It's a really subtle thing, but it gives some depth to the scene. So that's it. That's basically how we set up our background scenery. The next thing we want to do is bring in our characters. So first we'll bring in our knight. So we'll go back to our folder. We'll say knight parts. So this one, the way that I downloaded it has all the parts broken up. So we'll grab everything. In this case, I'm not going to use that or that. So the knight or the shield, and all the rest I'm going to drag onto the scene. And right away, clustered them all right in the middle. That's okay because we're going to rearrange them in a second. But what we want to do is grab this, shift click everything. We're going to group it together. We're going to call this group knight, hit return, and we're going to resize it. And in this case, I'm going to use 30%. That's the size that I want my knight to be. All right, so now let's move some stuff around and arrange it the way we need it to. The way that Lightwell handles layers is the top is the front, the bottom is the back. So if you remember bottom and back both end with B, that'll help you remember the order that the depth works on your scene. So first things first, we'll go in, we'll select, we'll move, we'll select our thing, we'll move this out of the way here, we're going to move our body over here, we're going to move our head here. Well, that doesn't work, that's behind the body. Remember what I said, bottom means back, so we want our body to be below our head. We don't want it to be grouped with it, we just want it to be below. You got to be kind of careful. Sometimes if you drag them on top of each other, it'll create a group. So now our head's in front of our body here. Now this one's a kind of a funny asset because the website that I downloaded it from, I think they meant the character to be facing the other direction, so to be flipped along the horizontal axis. So the left arm is actually the right arm. You'll see that's behind the body, so that doesn't work. So we'll move that up above. There we go. So now that's out in front. We'll grab the right arm, which is actually the left arm. In this case, we'll move that over here. Right leg. There we go. And left leg. We'll move that over here. Now we have our knight all set up. I think, okay, well, let's put the axe in his hand. So we'll move that over here. And our knight is all set up. So there's two little things that we need to do. I would like to group the axe and the right arm, or in this case the left arm, together so that when I do the animation, they're one moving thing. So easiest way to do that is to grab the axe layer and move it onto the right arm. And that is going to create a new layer, a new group, and we're going to call that axe. And that allows us to move that all as one piece. And that is how we move our knight asset onto the screen. So now when we click the knight group, we can move that all as one group. And you'll notice too that I'm not going to give him any parallax because I found messing around with the parallax with some of the characters that didn't look quite right. It's nice to have just the background moving around and you can sort of focus on the foreground and the characters without them dancing around on the screen. There's one little trick that I want to show you here with the axe arm, because when we go to animate it, we want to change the point that it rotates around. So we can click on the axe arm, which is our group. We can scroll down here to rotation, and this tiny little dot, that's our anchor point. So we'll move that to the shoulder, and so when we go to do our animation later, you'll see that it rotates around that shoulder point as opposed to rotating around the center of the group. And we're just going to do that with the left arm as well, because you'll see when we do our ambient motion that that works out better. In the class, one of you asked, is there a way that we can get the ambient motion to sync up? So let's jump into ambient motion and have a look at that. What ambient motion does is just what it says. It's something that you want to do when you're just looking at the scene and your characters are standing there and you want to give them a bit of life, or perhaps you want to highlight something that has interaction capabilities. So ambient motion is the way to do that. In this case, let's take the left arm, which is here, and the axe arm. We'll give it a bit of motion. So what I did there is I hit Command click. So I'm not going to group these things together, but I am going to change their properties at the same time. What this does is it syncs the ambient motion. So we'll say I want to have a 1 second animation, and I want the movement to be in the in the Y axis. So here we're going to say, let's go -5, no, sorry, -10. And you'll see his shoulders kind of go up and down, right? And then let's ease that out a little bit. There you go. So now you can see here, if I clear those little blocks, those shoulders are moving up and down. It's just got a little bit of motion to them, makes the scene feel like it's got a bit of life, and you'll see that those shoulders are synced together. So if, for example, we wanted the head to also be synced in that, we could have selected the head, the left arm, and the axe arm, and they all would have moved now at the exact same time. So that's ambient motion. We want to be subtle with our ambient motion. The ambient motion should serve the story, it should serve the scene. We don't want it to become a distraction for the reader. It adds that life, it adds that depth. The same with parallax, but if we're too heavy-handed with it, if we do too much, then it's going to take away from its effectiveness in the scene. Likewise, if there's something that you want to control with an interaction, so say we wanted this arm to be swinging, if we want to control that with an interaction, we will set that up as an animation. We don't want to set that up as ambient motion because it wouldn't make sense. If you don't plan on having an interaction with the arm swinging and you just want to have this knight kind of tossing the axe up and down, then we could go and we could add that as an ambient motion. The last thing we're going to do in this introductory video is we're going to drag our troll into the scene because we need some sort of conflict. So we'll do that really simply by going to our folder again, back in here, grabbing our troll asset, dragging it to the window. You can see that he just comes right up onto the screen, but he's facing the wrong direction. So what we're going to do is go down to transform, and we're going to flip it on the horizontal axis, and we're going to make him about 75%. So he's big, but he's not that big. And then we'll use the move tool and put our troll down on the ice. Now the two are ready to face off, and we can move on with setting up our animations and our interactions. The last thing we want to do is hit Command S to save our scene, and away we go.